Hello, and welcome to Horrific Tales. In this show, we celebrate the creations of independent authors and aspiring writers. Please like, subscribe, and share these episodes so we can help our talented friends get as much exposure as possible. We would also appreciate it if you could support our artists by following them on their individual platforms and by purchasing their works. Details on how to do so are in the show notes. Today's Horrific Tale is a piece submitted to us by the brilliant author Colin Martin. This story is from the Tales of Madness. Come join us now as we present to you The Dare. The fence rattled as Jim squeezed his way through the gap. The other kids watched on in gleeful anticipation. The fairground had been abandoned for years. Old man Travis had been too fond of his drink and had bankrupted the place. Well, so the parents said anyway. Other stories told that the old lot was haunted. Spirits had infested the place, frightening the customers and staff away and then driving the owner mad. He was found dead in the center of the merry-go-round. The paper had printed that he had fallen during either a cardiac arrest or a drunken episode. It was also said in hushed whispers that he had been killed by the spirits and that he himself now roamed the empty fairground. Many attempts had been made to sell off and redevelop the land over the years. Each time an investor would pull out, usually soon after actually visiting the site. So here it remained, empty, unused, and foreboding. This was the test each Halloween. Kids just about to enter their teenage years would have to earn their stripes. Coming up to the stroke of midnight, they would have to cross the plot until they reached the carousel. To be the one to pat one of the hobby horses on the head would earn that particular youth hero status for the rest of the year and be held in the highest esteem by their peers. To actually step into the middle where the old man met his untimely end, well, no kid had braved that far. Jim was going to be the kid to do it. He was determined. Why would ghosts want to haunt this dirty old place anyway? He asked himself as he made his way across the open field towards the now derelict structures. The line of stalls in front had been the furthest any of the other children had managed to get to. A few had made it just beyond, only to run back screaming in terror. Jim felt a wave of nauseating fear creep over him. Now where did this come from? It didn't make sense. He had explored abandoned buildings and houses before with his friends. This was an old industrial town. Once the steel works and car manufacturing had been moved overseas, most of the factories closed. There wasn't much left to do, and the kids amused themselves as best they could. They used the carcass of the old town as their playground. Like excited vultures, they flapped and picked through the bones of what used to be. Never once did it disturb him. This was different, however. Jim felt a little ill. Maybe this was a warning, a roar from this place to stay away. He wasn't going to stay away, though. He needed to do this. It wasn't something an 11-year-old could articulate. It was a nagging feeling inside him. This feeling was overpowering the fear right now. The calling was insistent, urgent, and urging him to push on. Jim gave in to this and made his way through the dilapidated stalls. Once this place had been the hive of joy and excitement, the scene now was in stark contrast to this. Abandoned prizes sat on some of the broken shelves. Soft toys rotted away by the elements over the years. This served to further enhance the feeling of death and decay around the place. Jim shivered in fear. He was terrified now. Any sense of boyish bravado was long gone. His instincts were telling him to run away, and run away fast. He had already been in further than any other kid. He would return a conquering hero, a legend among his peers. Something else had him in its grip now, urging him onwards. Just a little farther, it whispered to him. Jim almost felt as if he was being pulled now. He didn't try to fight it. He was in too far now. He had to see what was ahead. The stalls opened up now to a circular clearing. At the center of this was a carousel. Compared to the rest of the fairground, it looked almost new. It was still faded and had definitely left its best years behind. There wasn't the same rate of deterioration as the surrounding area. In fact, if Jim had taken a moment to think about it, he would have noticed that the degradation got worse the closer that he got to this place. He couldn't think now, and was almost in a dreamlike state as his senses left him. He didn't even try to resist the intoxicating pull as he stepped up onto the platform. Jim felt a slight hum as he walked between the hobby horses. As he brushed along the flank of one, he could almost have sworn that he felt it breathe. A slight buzz filled the air as the decorative light started to glow. Faintly at first, then brighter as the calliope at the center of the carousel came to life. Jim swayed through the structure, captivated by the combination of the thrumming music, pulsing lights, and the motion of the fairground ride. As he weaved between the horses, his throat became constricted, as if he had been out in the desert sun for too long. Jim started to feel dizzy as the speed of the ride began to increase. The tempo of the music and the flash of the lights sped up to join with the motion of the carousel. Jim fell to his knees as the cacophony of noise, light, and motion washed over him in waves. He held his head in his hands, covering his ears to try and block out some of the overpowering stimuli. The air was pierced by a screeching sound. The eyes of the horse next to Jim glowed red as it started to shake and snort. It let out a long whinny and broke free from its pole, shards of which splintered and landed on the young boy. Jim screamed as the pieces touched him. They were red-hot and seared his skin as they came into contact with him. His nostrils filled with the acrid smoke as a piece landed on his trouser leg, instantly melting the polyester fabric into his flesh. More baying and animalistic noises rose to a crescendo as each of the other horses on the carousel broke free and started to gallop. They rode and formed a circle around the carnival ride, picking up speed with each pass. Their eyes were aflame, and there was a desperation and almost frenzy to their action. Each loop of the carousel caused hot burning air to funnel in towards the center. Jim was trapped in the middle of this hellish centrifuge, and the pressure was building. The boy sobbed as each wave pulsed onto him. He screamed uncontrollably when his flesh started to bubble and melt. When his bones began to snap, his young brain couldn't take it anymore and he passed out. The horses kept running and the fiery pulses kept pounding, burning the boy's body until he wisped away in a pile of ash. The macabre display culminated with an explosion, sucking the horses back into the center of the merry-go-round, which was now folding in on itself. A sonic boom followed, blasting heat and death from the area from where the carnival ride had once stood. The stands and displays of the old fairground became a little more withered as the hot winds flowed through. When it reached the fence where the other children waited for their friend, they screamed and fled, animal terror now filling their brains, not unlike the horses, whose gallop had begun this waking nightmare. A wave of unease and despair flowed through the surrounding town and carried on until the horror finally dissipated into the night air. A lot of people were going to have a restless, fitful night ahead of them, particularly in a small apartment where a boy's parents held each other and cried not fully knowing why. And at the center, where it all began, the carousel stood once again, reformed and in its original condition. That is, except for one change. Among the rows of horses stood a new addition, freshly painted and steam rising from its flanks. As the wind died down and the night air began to cool, condensation began to form around the eyes of the figure, droplets falling like tears. Well, we hope you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you'd like to keep up to date, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Also, follow us on our social media pages. You can also show your support for the channel by going to our merchandise store, picking up some items there. Please also take a moment to support our contributing friends who kindly lend their talents to this show. Check out the links in the description as to how you can do this. Until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.